Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to be talking about soil amendments. I've cut the tops off a bunch of bags of things that I use when I am landscaping in my yard or here at the garden center, things I sell to customers. These are all very basic components. For some reason, we're trying to overcomplicate soil amendments now with fertilizers and water control polymers and all kinds of new things, but basic components like pine bark and compost and cow manure and all work great, and they always have and they always will. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to improve our soil over time. Unless you're putting in raised beds or something like that and you're bringing in all new soil, soil building takes time. It can't be done overnight, and if you're using the right things every year as you're doing projects, you'll see that over time you can really improve soil just by using the proper amendments. So we'll go through these. I talk about pine bark soil conditioner a lot, pine bark fines. For some reason, it's just not available in the box stores anymore. They used to sell it. They used to have pine bark fines or pine bark mulch, they would call it, but it'd be really ground up pine bark. I'll show that to you in a second. And then they'd have mini nuggets and nuggets, just size. Those mini nuggets and the nuggets more for mulch on the top. Tends to float. It's not the best mulch in the world if you're in a rainy area. But if you can't find the pine bark fines, I'm going to do a video later in the week about when I plant some annuals. I'm just going to use some mini nuggets and use that electric tiller I have, and I think I can bust up most of those mini nuggets into smaller pieces, and we can use those if you're having a hard time finding the pine bark fines if you have clay soils. But this particular week, I'm putting in my vegetable garden, annual beds, container planting some shrubs, container planting some annuals, and so I wanted to go over the soil amendments right here at the very beginning before those videos are on, so that as I'm talking about them during the week, you'll know what I'm talking about. So here we go. So the first thing I'll show you is the pine fines, or pine bark soil conditioner, as I call it sometimes. This is just the bark off a pine tree that's been ground up. It is great for preventing clay soils from recompacting. Most shrubs that you buy will be grown in some sort of bark mix like this. Usually they add sand in a nursery just to add some weight to it, because this material is super light and the plants would blow over all day if it didn't have some weight in the container. But this is just great material for mixing in to clay to keep it from recompacting. I'll also use this mixed into a potting soil when I plant shrubs in containers, and I'll show you that later in the week. Because I think potting soil stays a little too wet for shrubs. Your annuals will like it, and flowering things that flower heavily or grow all summer, or vegetables, that kind of thing. But shrubs would really prefer a little better drainage than that. So you'll see me use this quite a bit. Unfortunately, I don't know why the box stores don't carry just ground fine pines like this. The pine bark mulch, as they have it labeled now, has a lot of wood in it, and I wouldn't recommend having that mixed in. But I'm going to try to use some mini nuggets, which are just slightly scaled up pieces of this later in the week, and we'll see if we can break those up enough, and then you guys can use that instead. The other thing I'll mix into the clay frequently will be just a composted product like this. This is a compost that is basically sticks and twigs and leaves and food debris and those types of things composted down. This is a great product. But anything that's an organic compost like this, it has a little bit, it's always going to have a little chunky material in it, so it's always good for clay as well. But this would also work if you have sandier soils. It's good for draining clay soils. It's also good for holding a little bit of water in place for sandy soils. So I recommend compost pretty much no matter what type of soil you have when you're planting. The next thing over here is cow manure, and this is a blended cow manure, and it's blended with that other compost that was next to me over there. But this is a great product. Don't be scared of cow manure. Yes, I'm holding cow manure in my hand. Don't be scared of it. It has no smell. Once it's composted, it's just like any other compost or any other type of soil. It has no smell, just smells earthy. No problem there. I sell at my garden center a product that is a combination of the pine bark soil conditioner and the compost blended together as a planting soil. This is a great combo for clay. You won't be able to find this probably many places, but if you can find the pine bark fines or some, maybe we're going to get away with the mini nuggets when I try that later in the week, and that compost, and put these materials, about 50% of this material and about 50% of the soil you pull out of the hole, and That's really great in clay soils. If you have sandier soils, I would definitely lean over here more in the compost and cow manure area, and that's plenty adequate to hold some additional water in place between rains, because sand tends to drain really well. If you have loamy soils that are easy to dig in and just have great soils in general, I wouldn't worry too much about these amendments. If it makes you feel better, you know, a couple shovelfuls of compost is great for everything. And these things are just going to build soil over time. Okay, as we move on down, we get into the potting soil category. These are things we're going to use in containers. I actually like a chunkier potting soil. This product right here has some compost in it, so it has some chunkier pieces in it. I'll go through, if I didn't have this stuff here, I'd go through at a box store and I'll just pinch the side of the bag repeatedly until I find, it's usually the cheapest potting soil will have a little chunkiness in it where they've blended some compost in it to cut the cost on it, because peat moss is expensive. That's the material that I want to use for woody trees and shrubs in containers, is a chunkier potting soil. I don't want to use a premium potting soil for that. The premium potting soils that have the peat moss in them, which is most potting soil really, I use for annuals and that kind of thing. I know a lot of people are opposed to using peat moss now because it is a mined product, and we are mining it out of the ground faster than it could ever be sustainable. And a lot of people want to use coconut coir. Unfortunately, coconut coir just, it costs a lot, and there aren't enough coconuts on earth to replace the amount of peat moss that's being used every year in bedding plants and nursery plants, and for all kinds of industries that use peat moss. It's such a great product for wicking up water and holding on to water. But every premium potting soil you buy is going to be some combination of peat. Maybe you can find one with coconut coir, and then it's going to have some perlite, which is this white material here, which keeps it very light and airy. These premium potting soils, the only thing I really use them for is in containers for my annuals. My annuals that go in the ground, because I have clay soils, I use a combination of pine bark and cow manure. You'll see that later in the week. For my vegetable garden, every year I'm going to use compost, maybe a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of compost on top, and incorporate that into the soil. Sometimes as I plant, or maybe it'll be a year to till. Keep in mind, if you're not using a raised bed soil, this blended mix right here would be good for filling a raised bed. If you're not putting in raised beds and you're planting your vegetable garden in the ground the first year, it will not be the best year for your garden. It just won't be. It takes time to build soil, and so don't ever get discouraged if you have a vegetable garden the first year. Add, you know, 1 inch of compost to it, incorporate that in, use an organic fertilizer, which will help build the soil, and then it's going to take a few years for it, and it'll get better each year. So you may have limited success. I'm just setting you up for that. Unless you're spending money and putting in a raised bed and putting in all new soil, sometimes it does take a little while to build soil for a vegetable garden. Down here at the end, I cut the top off a bag of topsoil, because I definitely want you to see. Topsoil is just going to be filled soil. This particular product right here is filled soil blended with some compost. And topsoil is just that. It's topsoil. Don't mix this stuff into the ground, you know, just not knowing what the components are. This is going to be for filling low spots in your lawn, maybe a spot that's not draining properly, but it is meant to go on the top and mimic the existing topsoil layer that's in your yard. So keep that in mind. It'll be the cheapest thing because, you know, like I say, it was dug out of a farm field somewhere and then blended with compost. So it will be the cheapest thing there, but it will typically have a lot of sand in it. And certainly if you have clay soils and you start blending the sand in it, that's not a good combination at all. So anyway, there's some just basic components that can be blended into almost any soil and create, you know, much improved environment for your plants and, you know, your annuals and your vegetables. And throughout the week, all the videos that'll be going up, I'll be using these products in different ways. So as always, thank you very much for watching my video, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel.